Dr. Sinha, let me start off by asking you, because you've really seen the journey, haven't you? You've built an institution, you've gone on to head several other institutions that have also been trying to ride the wave with requirements of different kinds of needs in education across the generations. What do you feel today is the most challenging requirement for some of these educational institutes to cater to in the changing dynamic that we're seeing today?
Are you talking about educational institutions in general or
B
business?
schools.
B schools, right. So I think three things I would say. I think one of the big challenges is that, business schools have all been about educating professionals, which by definition means that these are people who have to be ready for the workplace. Now, the workplace itself is changing so rapidly, and the requirements of managers and leaders for the future is changing so rapidly, is that how does the education that you provide keep pace with it? This has always been a problem in general for education, but as the pace of change goes up, it becomes a bigger gap between what people need and what education needs to provide. So I think that's one problem. I think the second problem is that in all education, the model we have of a classroom and a teacher starts to really crumble when you look at the numbers that we have in India. And where it starts to crumble is the number of faculty that you need to meet that demand. Whatever you assume as how many students to a faculty and how many hours possibly a faculty can teach, the numbers just don't add up. There's so much demand for business education that you can't find or produce enough faculty. And so quality starts to suffer as you scale. And that's a big challenge. And the third is, of course, that education models themselves are changing. So does a student even need to go to a physical institution and study for 3 years or 1 year or 2 year or whatever? So I think those are three big challenges that we face.
Okay, that's super interesting, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But, talking about changing needs, we're an extremely diverse, cross-cultural environment. There's been a lot of talk about how courses are starting to cater to some of these more unique needs. Are you finding that, and are institutions realizing that perhaps a more diverse set of skills is required to succeed today?
Yes, of course. I think every institution of relevance does realize that. And they are trying to make changes. Just to give you an example, I'm involved in setting up a new B school. And in that new B school, we've decided that product management has to be an integral part of that MBA program. But really, where do you find people who can teach product management? And you can cobble together a bunch of people. You have faculty who may have theoretically learned what product management is, but you don't have traditional academics really or at least very few who really understand. And practitioners are too busy to come in to a school to teach, and especially if the school is in a second tier or a third tier town. So yeah, I think the implementation or the executability of the gaps or the changes that you want to bring about is really where the challenge is.
So how does one solve for that? Because clearly today that's what everyone's looking for. How do you build? How do you be innovative? And there are no ready solutions or packages in terms of how to solve some of these problems. It's still a work in progress, even with some of the finest entrepreneurs today.
Yeah. So again, I would say some of the things that I have tried is all I can tell you. I don't think there's a silver bullet, as you say. One of the things is to rely a lot on visiting faculty. Sometimes you run out of those options also. I think the second is to bring in practitioners into the classroom. There is a general recognition of that. If you look at fields like design or law, this was always the the way education was imparted, that lawyers, architects, designers actually go back and teach in the schools they are from, or in local design or law schools. But this was never really the mode in engineering or management or business, for example. So bringing people back, the key there is to watch out and also train them on teaching, because you can come in and tell war stories in a classroom, and it sounds very nice, but there's no learning. So not every practitioner can become a great teacher, and some preparation has to happen. The last thing which I'm a big fan of now is digital learning, and I know that there's a lot of skepticism about how much and how you can learn. But I think my own experiments at Harappa have shown that you can actually learn a lot. And you can see that. You can see that with the mushrooming of education firms and education technology by traditional institutions. So those are some of the ways where you're really trying to find all avenues to bridge that gap of faculty and teachers, of new things that are constantly coming up.
Are there certain courses, however, that one is seeing at the forefront when it comes to things like tech, for instance, and other means of skilling? What are the kind of new modules, courses, or things that you think we should see more of going forward now?
I think on the job learning and lifelong learning is something that you are going to see, because so far we've been in the mode of saying you study for 3 years, or you study for 4 years, or you do masters for 2 years or 1 year, and in a way you're basically done. And along the way you do a little bit of training or learning and development at your workplace. Mostly those used to be managerial or leadership or communication type training. Now you really need technical, functional training constantly to keep pace. And so one of the big changes that is going to happen is that you'll see a lot of, when traditionally we used to call it executive education, but now that executive education, even executive education, you would get sent by your company to some B school for a few days or a week, maybe 2-3 times in your career. Now I think you're going to have to do that in line with your work every year, constantly through your working life. I think that's a big change that is coming.
Okay. So, when someone's setting out on a B school mission today, what really should be the top things in their mind when they're going about choosing the right B school? When we're looking at some institutions here in India and they're really now above par, would you say that it's a completely viable option for them to perhaps dive into that? Would you recommend perhaps professionalizing initially before going in for further studies? Just articulate it for us, especially for all of the aspiring students that are watching. What do you think the right, step-by-step agenda should be?
Well, I think that getting some business experience before going to B school used to be a view in the past as well, but the view was divided. People used to say, well, if you go directly to B school, it's okay, right from college. I'm convinced that in today's day and age, it's whether you're doing a 2-year MBA, 1-year MBA, whatever format, 18 months, it's good to get some work experience, because you get a sense of the workplace before you go into the MBA program. And I think the second is that a lot is said about specializing in a particular area, and there's always going to be a flavor of the month, right? Today everybody wants to specialize in data science, and earlier everybody used to specialize in finance or strategic marketing. Today everybody's specializing in digital marketing or product management. I personally think that while specialization is important, it's actually much more important to get the foundational skills, because those foundational skills are really what are going to stand you in good stead when things go up and down and change completely on you in the future. And those are the skills that are resilient. So picking a university or picking a college or an institution or a program that will give you a solid grounding is very important. And the last thing I will say is that Uh, I think if you look for programs that are doing innovative things, nobody quite knows what to do. But if you see that a program is bringing in good practitioners, or if you see a program that has a good program for mentorship. Uh, I run a program where we send our women to shadow a woman CXO for a full 1 month. Now, if you can do something like that instead of the typical internship, then you add tremendous value. So, looking for programs that are trying to do some things that are different is another thing that I would bring into the decision making process.
And you've always done this, and we've seen this. We've seen how you've shaped this culture for the B School to really do a lot more and give back in a more meaningful way to society and development than, of course, just the pure function of education itself. What is your vision going forward? You've come so far, Dr. Sinha. You're an institutional in yourself. How do you see the future of the country shaping up, where education is such a pain point, it's such a dire need? Do you, as you said, you're working on a new B school, whether it be the issue of sort of having enough to go around as well as enough people that can afford it?
I am increasingly convinced that we've been trying to predict where the world is going and then saying, how should we educate and prepare people for that world? And I'm not saying throw that out, but honestly, I don't know what that world is. And I don't know too many people who do really know what that world is. You can prepare some people through some of the systems and educational institutions that we have today, but there's a large mass of people in India. I mean, the numbers are just staggering. And I think never before in the history of the human race have you had to educate so many people so quickly. We are not creating enough jobs for these people. We don't have enough institutions for these people. I personally feel that the future lies in the fact that using, of course, existing institutions, but using technology, if we can unlock the power of, we can give everybody the power to educate themselves. I think that will be a huge step forward, because if I look at the programs that I'm involved in, at the end of the day, it's less about what skills we are teaching them. It's the confidence you are giving them. It's the choice that you're giving them. It's the opportunities that you are making them realize they can actually go after themselves. Young people in India don't need spoon feeding, and now with this whole explosion in entrepreneurship, not all of them are looking for jobs either. So I find that the easier problem to solve is to say, can I use technology and some combination of technology and physical instruction or learning to really give the last student the opportunity to learn something that they want, even if it's wrong for them, they'll figure it out, which gives them the confidence that I'm not getting left behind. And I have an opportunity to bid for a job or start a company or do something. I run a program in Leh Ladakh, which has been running for 4 years now. And I'm fascinated how, with very little input, but just a little bit of confidence, giving students respect, giving them access to good faculty, you see how they just transform their lives. Ritesh Agarwal of OYO has now funded 10 of those startups. He's taking 5 of those entrepreneurs to London this week for some meeting. And I'm not saying this to highlight that, but just to give you an example that these are very people who come from very modest backgrounds, but just a little bit of exposure to high quality education has just completely unlocked something in them that even I am surprised at, having been involved in education for so long. So I do think that instead of saying ye padhana hai, they need a B school degree or they need a data science degree or they need digital learning, if we just expose young people to high quality content, knowledge, skills, courses, they'll figure stuff out. And I think that's the only way I can see forward for the numbers that we are dealing with.
Fabulous. When we look at edtech, and of course Harappa has been super successful, there are others in the edtech space that are, going through difficult times. Is there a case to? I mean, I know you just said that a lot of people like online learning, but would you say that it's becoming more challenging to see profitability in online learning, or would you say that the market is still wide open?
I think the market is still wide open. I think you haven't seen anything yet. See, what's happening with digital learning is what happened with the printing press. What's happening with digital learning is what happened with digital media, by the way, right? The way we consume news, entertainment has just transformed itself. I mean, if you look at something today, you wouldn't imagine that all we did was read print editions and watch grainy television, right? Or listen to the radio. It's completely changed. And at least in my lifetimes, you are younger, but it's a matter of 20, 30 years. I think education is going to change the same way. And we don't realize that because we are all still stuck in the school model. If you imagine what happened when the printed textbook came, people didn't go to school in those days. They just went to the feet of a master and learned. Here, suddenly, education became a mass market thing because that physics textbook could teach physics anywhere in the world. Similar things are happening, and I don't want to get into the theory of it, but my point is that I personally think that, particularly in India, where people are not getting access to that textbook, that classroom, that teacher, for a lot and for millions of Indians, the only access they will have is a computer screen or a mobile phone through which they're going to learn. So we have no option but to adopt this technology and make the best of it. And I think most of the innovations will come from India because the rest of the world doesn't need it. They have enough institutions, they have enough things happening. Here, we have a real need and a real gap. And this is the only thing we have.
In fact, I was just going to ask you that as the closing. I was just going to say, when it comes to entrepreneurs, and you mentioned Ritesh, of course, taking these 5 young companies, but how much more do you really see, when we're already seeing a spate of unicorns, what is the kind of enormous traction that you anticipate, with this kind of innovation taking place here in India?
Well, I think that we are a world in ourselves. I'm not an economist, so I don't want to go into that territory, but I think we are a microcosm of, the world maybe 100 years ago, or the United States 80 years ago. I think that's the kind of opportunity we are looking at because of our demographic. People need food to eat, people need education, people need health services, people will travel, people need to buy clothes, and they are going to get more affluent. That is how human progress has happened. So I think just by the sheer dint of human progress, you will actually see massive opportunities in this country. And so I don't think entrepreneurship is a flash in the pan. I think by counting unicorns, it's great because it's exciting, but honestly, there are many, many small businesses that are getting created. Like the one in Ladakh that, if you go to Bombay and Bangalore today and eat Kashmiri Himalayan trout, it's from a company called Zarin that is started by these 3 boys. And honestly, it's not going to be a unicorn. I shouldn't say not, but it's a thriving business and they're doing well. And I think the millions of such businesses that are getting created is really where the future is. And of course, some of them will become unicorns, which is great.
So inspiring, Dr. Sinha. Thank you so much, and a big round of applause. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.